Hi guys, it's Dre254. In my junior year at high school, which was the year I just got out of, one of my electives was computer graphics. It was basically an art class, but I created projects on the computer that the teacher would give us instructions for using Photoshop and Illustrator. In this video, I'll be showing you all the projects that I created in that class, and I'll talk a bit about them as well as I go on. Let's get started. The first project of the year was our pixel art project. All of the project names that are put in text will all be the names of the projects that my computer graphics teacher put them listed as in Google Classroom. For this project, I created a rainbow background, and I made 2 documents in Photoshop in which I listed all my songs from my albums Dancing Spirit and The Wall of Tie-Dye, with the release dates using the pixelated text tool. For the first one, you can see that I manually created the numbers, but I just used the text tool for the other one. The final 3 tracks from my album The Wall of Tie-Dye are all out now. But when I created this, it was right after I finished my 7th song on the album called 17 that morning. I didn't put the release date for Spectrums of Rainbows on my first album since there wasn't enough room, but it would have said December 9th, 2020. After doing that project, I even changed the wallpaper of my computer to my Dancing Spirit album cover. That didn't last for more than 2 months since the computers eventually all got restored and I never ended up changing it back. For the second project of the year, my class searched up an image on Google of an animal or a person, and we painted over the image and changed the background. What I decided to do was to search up a corgi, which is the breed of dog that you can see in the picture, and I painted over it and changed the background from a nature background to one that I painted blue. My mom would love this one if she sees it because she thinks corgis are adorable, and that's why we have one ourselves named Brody. Next up is my low poly artwork. For this project, my class looked up pictures of nature on Google, and then we used a tool on Photoshop that would allow us to draw lines and connect them. And then we hit filter, blur, and then average inside. That allows us to fill the shape with the average color of the part of the image that is blocking. As you can see on my project, I did this with the photo of mountains. It was a bit of a tedious process, but that's because I wanted to make sure it ended up being good. For this next project, my class used various landscape images. In mine, I used a sky, mountains, and a sea that goes below, and I used effects to change the colors. Another sky of the same color cut in a circle put on top, and then I put an airplane in the sky and a ship on the sea. I lowered the opacity of the mountains as well so it would fade in with the sky. When I created this, I tried editing it further because I felt like my project was inferior to my classmates' projects. But then it kinda looked spooky. I think it was better to leave it like this after all. Next up, we've got our holiday card project, in which we were given instructions to make a Christmas card on our computers. This is the first project that we used the 3D tool for to make the ornaments 3-dimensional, and I used the gradient tool to make the background go from red to white and then white to green. Anyways, does this project look familiar to you? If so, that's because I used this project as the cover and in the video of my song Winter Season, which came out only 25 days after this project, and I think it turned out to be a good idea. For this next project, we were to create a playlist of songs on Photoshop using a theme, including a Spotify watermark in the corner since we were pretending it was a Spotify playlist. The way I sort my Spotify playlist is by songs beginning with each letter of the alphabet. I decided to make the project using my list of songs beginning with the letter B. The ones I had listed aren't the only ones on the list, as there are so many more songs than that on the real Spotify playlist, but I limited it to 7 songs on my computer graphics project, including the addition of my most recent song that I made at the time at the bottom. For the picture above, I used the Face app on my phone to mash my face with my friend Derek's face, and I called it Dreyrick's List. The reason I went with the letter B for my songs list was because Derek enjoys listening to that playlist, so it would be a good idea to merge his face with mine with cutting out faces separately on the corners. The background I used was from the Greta Van Fleet concert I went to on July 29, 2022. I sent a photo of the project to Derek through text when it was done, and he approved of it. After we turned in our playlist project, we moved on to a quick project that we used to get ourselves adjusted to Illustrator, since this was where we moved on from Photoshop to Illustrator. The teacher told all of us to create a robot to the best of our abilities. I made mine entirely up of quadrilaterals using different shades of blue and purple. The next time we had class, we started our first longer project with instructions, which is coming up now. Next up, exploding planets. This is where we really experimented with Illustrator. First, we created the stars in the sky and added the flare by using the flare tool. Then we created the planets. We used the mesh tool to add points to the spheres, and then we changed the colors of the points so the spheres would appear three-dimensional like planets. To make the planets appear as they were destroying themselves, we used the crystallize tool and the polygon tool. And you can see that I added a ring around the little red planet that I created, as creating a ring around one of the planets was also an instruction. Finally, I added a watermark saying Dre Productions. I would have loved doing this project back in 2nd grade, as I had an obsession with planets that year. Project 9 was Cityscape. My class was assigned to create a cityscape in Illustrator, starting off with the background. For the background, we made circles with the ellipse tool. We were allowed to use any colors we wanted, so I decided to make it a night theme. As for the city, the pen tool helped us to create the different building heights in one stroke, and we put each layer on top of each other. Photoshop and Illustrator make it easy, since we can move what layers overlap each other. Then we added windows, lights, clouds, and I put a moon in there. Also, for those of you who don't know, this project ended up being used for the song cover for my song Night City, which released on February 22nd this year. In fact, if it wasn't for this project, I might never have even came up with the idea to make that song, so I'm glad we did this project. Night City is the YouTuber Spectral Sound's favorite song that I made. I also made album covers for the rock band Ella Leah made up called Fusion, while I had free time in my computer graphics class towards the end of the school year. And I posted the covers on my alt account for YouTube 584. For their album Neon City, I just used this cover instead of creating a new one like I did for the rest. One more thing I'd like to mention about this project is that every year, my school has an art show, in which every student who is taking an art class chooses a project to be hung up in the library for everyone to look at the night that they have the art show. And I decided to put this one there, so we printed it out. I didn't go to the art show at night, but my computer graphics class went into the library during class to look at everyone's art projects they made throughout the year. Let's move on now. Now we've got a project in which we create a two-dimensional character. For this project, we learned to use Illustrator's Pathfinder tool to create all the different shapes that we needed to make our characters by cutting and combining the shapes. Who is my character supposed to be? I don't know. I just created some random guy with green hair. I felt that it was better for me to make someone random since it was my first time doing a flat design character on the computer. Have you ever seen that guy before? I just found out who he was when I made this project. I'm obviously kidding, it's me. My class was assigned to use a picture of ourselves or someone that we knew and paint over it while changing the background to one color. Our teacher showed us examples on the board of the same kind of portraits with various different people before we started our desktops. In order to get the pictures of ourselves or whoever we were doing the portrait with, we transported it to Google Classroom so we could copy and paste it into Illustrator, and then we started. Next up, we did a typography warp for our next project, which means that we took a picture that we found on Google and put words to make up the picture. Then we'd use the mesh tool to create anchor points and distort the words. As you can see, I decided to use a silhouette of a cat, including adjectives to describe the cat and sounds that a cat makes. Some other things that I put were the name of the cat, which is Apollo, and I even have Dre Productions in there. There are two words you may be wondering about. Those words are Gatto and Katze, which are the Spanish and German words for the word cat. The latter I need Google Translate for. Anyways, let's move on now. For this project, my class typed something in, then at the top we went to Effect, 3D and Materials, 3D Classic, and finally Extrude and Bevel. You can see that I used my YouTube name, and I put the part that says Dre using the traditional colors I use, and then I slowly went from white to black for the rest of my YouTube name. Then I added spots to the part that says Dre, since adding dots were part of the instructions. Before I did that though, I screenshot the image. I also zoomed into the part that says Dre and used it for my Instagram logo, which you might know if you look at my Instagram. The next assignment was linked to our previous one. We all used a single letter. In my case, I used D for Dre, and we used the gradient tool while dividing at least 2 points to make the letter look like it has an inside to it. I feel mine would have been better if I did it more than twice, since the curve of my D looks flat. But it was kind of hard for me to do the first two though already. You could say that it goes upward at the curve though, because it does somewhat look like that. For this next project, we were free to write a quote with an interesting background. For my quote, I decided to go with the moral, "Every day is a new day," which is one that my first grade teacher taught me, which means that bad things that happened on previous days don't matter anymore. And just because you had a bad day today, doesn't mean that tomorrow won't be good. Below the quote, I made a 4x4 set of 4 triangles making up a rectangle using a color pack. And I carved out a sun using the magic pen to put over top of the 4x4 set. I also made the background the same color as the sun. Finally, I used a 3D tool to bulge everything. Next up, we created our own superhero. 2 weeks before we got done, we drew our design of our superhero on a piece of paper. Then we would put a screenshot of our picture into Illustrator and designed over top of it. We traced our drawing in Illustrator, and we used the Pathfinder tool so we could make all the different shapes before we filled them in with color. I ended up creating the Dooman, as he's half dog and half human. Hopefully you can see it, but I'll read Dooman's information to the right of him. His strengths are the strongest bite and sharpest claws. His weaknesses are cats and vacuum cleaners. And his number one quote is, "I'm not just a dog human, but the dog human, so no bad guy can mess with me." For the background, I put 9 strips that go down with a fading color to match with Dooman. Then from April 18th to May 15th, our class was doing super fight brackets, which started with 32 students, including ones from one other class who did the same project. And I think we had the perfect amount since there was just one other class who did the same project this year. Everyone's design was put against another student's design, and all the students would vote for which one they liked better. Every winner would move to the next round. The one that ended up as the winner of the entire thing was the girl who made the superhero Crawling Darkness. And it was well deserved since she did an amazing job with it. As the name implies, it was a very scary superhero, but it was perfectly detailed. For this next project, we created something different. We placed 2 circles of 2 different gradient colors. After that, we used the Object, Blend, Make option to create a circle in between the 2 that goes in between the colors. But we turned up the specified steps to such a great number that it would look like it just fades in. Then we used the Pen tool and made a one-dimensional spine. To finally create the effect you see on my project, we selected the one-dimensional spine and the combination of gradient circles together, and hit Object, Blend, Replace Spine to get this result. Then we traced over a word in cursive text. You can see that I did Dre, and we were supposed to make that have the 3-dimensional effect as well, but since that was too much for me to do, my teacher had me only do it with the letter D. But overall, I like how mine turned out. For this next project, we were to create anything that we can find inspiration from. Some of our options were a magazine cover, a movie poster, psychedelic art, etc. The choice that I went with was to create a CD cover. For the CD cover, I made a starry futuristic night sky. I also added 2 planets that I made up and a flare in the middle of the image. I even had in mind what the title of the CD would be. It would be called 2084, as it's a futuristic background and it's implying that it's from that year. I likely thought of it because Van Halen has an album called 1984. The next project was another quick one-day project in which we had a choice between 100 different silly drawing prompts from a page that has a list of all the different options. The one that I decided to go with was a can of soda spewing out rainbows. I even named the soda Dracola. I needed to look up a video that showed how to make a cylinder in Illustrator, but it was a pretty easy thing to do. We've made it to the final project of the year, which was our album cover collage. For this one, it wasn't 100% on the computer. We looked through magazines, cut out pictures, and put them on a sheet of paper. I decided to go with the theme of old-looking things. After that, we used a machine in the room that transported our work to the computers where we can make more edits. For this last project, we went back to Photoshop one last time. It felt a bit weird using it for the first time since December. Anyways, for the edits, I just ended up adding an image of an old clock from Google. I tried to crop it out of the white background, but it was hard to do since the clock is round. Then I decided to name it Ancient Culture by adding text. For the rest of the year after we did this, we didn't have any more work. We mostly just watched movies at the middle seats for the rest of the year. There you go. I hope you all enjoyed viewing my project that I made in my computer graphics class of my 2022 to 2023 school year. Bye everyone.